Zara 9 moved through the dark corridors of Nexus Prime like a ghost that nobody could see. Her small blue hands gripped the repair tools as she walked toward the docking bay where 3 new ships had arrived that morning. The station hummed with activity above her head, but down here in the maintenance levels everything stayed quiet and cold. She had been working on this station for 3 full cycles now, and still, nobody knew her real name. They all called her Zara 9 because that was the number painted on her work uniform. The other workers from her home planet had numbers too. Zara 8 cleaned the food courts and Zara 12 fixed the air systems. None of the other species bothered to learn who they really were. The Catherians were small people with skin that looked like blue glass. When the light hit them just right, they seemed to glow a little bit. They could also push their hands through solid metal when they needed to reach inside machines to fix them. This made them very good at repair work, but it also made the other species think they were just living tools instead of real people. Zara-9 climbed up the ladder to the main docking level and saw the usual crowd of traders and travelers. The tall lizard people called Drachomori stood near their red and gold ship talking in their hissing language about cargo prices. Their scales caught the station lights and made them look like walking jewels, but their yellow eyes were cold when they looked at anyone they thought was beneath them. Near the food vendor stalls, the crystal people called Vex floated a few inches off the ground. Their bodies looked like living diamonds that sang in musical tones when they talked to each other. They thought they were the smartest beings in the galaxy and treated everyone else like children who needed to be taught basic lessons. The warrior race called Gorton stomped around in their heavy boots, making the metal floors ring with each step. They were twice as tall as most other species, and their gray skin was covered with scars from old battles. They believed that strength was the only thing that mattered in life, and they had no patience for anyone who could not fight. All of these species had been part of the Galactic Council for hundreds of years. They knew the rules and they knew their place in the order of things. The service races like the Catherians stayed in the lower levels and did the work that nobody else wanted to do. The important species made the decisions and counted the money, and flew the big ships between the stars. Zara 9 walked past them all without any of them noticing her. She was used to being invisible by now. Sometimes she wondered what it would feel like to have someone look at her and really see her instead of just seeing a tool that could fix their machines. But those thoughts were dangerous because they made her want things she could never have. She reached the docking bay where the new ships waited and checked her work tablet. The first ship belonged to a Drachomori merchant who wanted his engines cleaned. The second ship carried a Vex research team who needed their computer systems updated. The third ship was different, though. It was smaller than the others and painted in simple white and blue colors. The writing on the side said Wanderer's Dream, and underneath that in smaller letters it said Earth Registry. Humans were the newest species to join the Galactic Council. Most of the other races did not know what to think about them yet. They did not seem to have any special powers like the other species. They could not breathe in different atmospheres or lift heavy objects with their minds or phase through solid matter. They were just ordinary in every way that anybody could measure. Zara-9 had never worked on a human ship before. She wondered if they would treat her the same way as all the others did. Probably they would. All species learned quickly how things worked on council stations. The important people stayed up in the bright levels and the service people stayed down below where nobody had to look at them. She walked up to the human ship and pressed her hand against the access panel. The door opened with a soft hiss and she stepped inside. The corridors were narrow but clean, and the walls were painted in warm colors that reminded her of sunrise back on her home planet. Most ships had cold metal walls that showed nothing but function and efficiency. The engine room was at the back of the ship, and when she found it, she was surprised by how quiet everything was. Human technology did not make the loud humming sounds that most other ships did. Their engines purred like sleeping animals instead of roaring like hungry beasts. Zara-9 set down her tool bag and began checking the systems, the work order said. The humans wanted a full maintenance check before they left the station. This was normal procedure for any ship that planned to make a long journey through space. She connected her scanner to the engine core and watched the numbers scroll across the small screen. Everything looked good, but there was one small problem with the cooling system. It was not dangerous, but it would make the engines run less efficiently over time. She could fix it in about an hour if she could phase her hand through the outer casing to reach the damaged component inside. As she began to work, she heard footsteps coming down the corridor toward the engine room. She did not look up because she assumed whoever it was would just walk past without saying anything. That was what always happened when she was working on other ships. The footsteps stopped right behind Zara 9, and she heard a voice say something that had never happened to her before in 3 cycles of working on the station. The voice said her number, but it said it like a question instead of a command. She turned around and saw a human male standing in the doorway of the engine room. He was not very tall compared to most species, but he was still bigger than her. His skin was brown like the dirt on her home planet, and his hair was black with small bits of gray at the sides. His eyes were dark, and when he looked at her, she felt something strange happen. He was actually seeing her. "You are Zara 9, right?" he said, and his voice was gentle like he was talking to a friend instead of a maintenance worker. "I am Luke Carter. I take care of the engines on this ship." Zara 9 did not know how to answer, because nobody had ever introduced themselves to her before. She nodded and tried to make her voice work properly. "Yes, I am here to check your systems," Luke smiled, and it was a real smile that reached his eyes. "Great, I was hoping someone would come look at the cooling unit. It has been making a weird noise for the past week, but I cannot figure out what is wrong with it." He walked over to where she was working and pointed at the same component she had been examining. "It sounds like a small bird is trapped inside there, but I cannot get the casing open without shutting down the whole engine." Zara 9 looked at him with surprise. Most beings just told her what they wanted fixed and then left her alone to do the work. They did not explain the problems or ask for her opinion about anything. "I can reach inside without opening it," she said quietly. "That is why they send my people to do this work, because you can phase through solid matter," Luke said and nodded. "That must be really useful for fixing things. But it is also pretty amazing just as a natural ability." She stared at him. Nobody had ever called anything about her people amazing before. The other species saw their phasing ability as just a tool that made them good servants. Luke was talking about it like it was something special and interesting. "Most people think it just makes us good for maintenance work," she said. Luke frowned. "Most people do not think very much then. Having the ability to move through solid matter means your people understand physics in ways that the rest of us can only dream about. Your brain has to calculate molecular density and atomic spacing just to phase safely. That takes incredible intelligence." Zara 9 had never heard anyone talk about her people that way. She felt something warm growing in her chest that she did not recognize at first. Later she would realize it was the feeling of being respected. She phased her hand through the casing and found the problem quickly. A small component had come loose and was vibrating against the cooling pipes. She pushed it back into place and secured it with her tools. The strange noise stopped immediately. "There," she said. "It should work better now." Luke listened to the engine for a moment and smiled. "Perfect. That sound was driving me crazy." "Thank you," he said. "Thank you." Zara 9 could not remember the last time anyone had thanked her for doing her job. She packed up her tools and started to leave because that was what she always did when the work was finished. "Wait," Luke said. "Would you mind staying for a few more minutes? I have some other questions about the engines if you have time." She stopped and looked back at him. Nobody had ever asked if she had time before. They just assumed she would do whatever they needed her to do. "I have time," she said. For the next hour, Luke asked her questions about engine design and maintenance procedures. But they were not the kind of questions she expected. He did not just want to know how to fix things. He wanted to know why certain designs worked better than others, and what she thought about different approaches to solving problems. Zara 9 found herself talking more than she had talked to anyone in months. Luke listened to everything she said and asked follow-up questions that showed he was really paying attention. When she mentioned something about plasma flow dynamics, he asked her to explain how her people had learned to work with such dangerous energy systems. "We started working with plasma technology because we had to," she told him. "Our home planet has natural plasma storms, and we learned to phase through the energy fields to survive. That knowledge made us good at working with ship engines later, so your people are not just maintenance workers," Luke said. "You are actually plasma engineers who understand energy systems better than most species in the galaxy." Zara 9 had never thought about it that way, but when he said it, she realized he was right. Her people did understand plasma technology in ways that others did not. They had developed that knowledge over thousands of years of living with natural plasma phenomena. "Why do you think about us differently than everyone else does?" she asked him. Luke was quiet for a moment. "Where I come from, we have a saying. It goes like this: everyone you meet knows something you do not know. The smart thing to do is find out what that something is. But most species think humans do not have anything special to offer the galaxy," Zara 9 said. Luke laughed, but it was not a mean laugh. "Most species think a lot of things that are not true. They thought your people were just living tools until I talked to you for 5 minutes. Now, I know you are plasma engineers who could probably teach me things about energy systems that I never learned in school." When their conversation finally ended, Zara 9 felt different somehow. She walked back through the station corridors, but instead of feeling invisible, she felt like someone had seen her for the first time in her life. Luke had looked at her and seen an engineer instead of just a maintenance worker. Over the next few days, she found herself thinking about their conversation. She wondered what other things Luke might want to talk about and whether he really meant what he had said about her people being engineers instead of servants. She got her answer 2 days later when she was working in the Drakmori ship and heard someone calling her number from the corridor. She looked out and saw Luke standing there with a smile on his face. "I was wondering if you might have time to look at something else on my ship," he said. "There is a problem with the navigation computer that I think you might be able to help me solve." Zara 9 followed Luke back to the Wanderer's Dream, and they spent the afternoon working on the navigation computer together. But this time it felt different than just doing repairs. Luke asked her what she thought about different solutions and listened carefully when she explained how Catherian technology approached similar problems. They worked side by side and talked about many things that had nothing to do with fixing machines. Luke told her stories about his home planet, Earth, and the different places he had visited during his years traveling through space. He described oceans that stretched beyond the horizon and mountains that reached up toward the stars. He talked about cities full of millions of humans and quiet farms where families grew food in fields of green plants. Zara 9 found herself telling him about her own home planet too. She described the crystal caves where her people lived and the way the plasma storms painted colors across the sky during the night hours. She told him about the music her people made by singing in harmonic frequencies that could resonate through solid crystal, and how they celebrated the changing seasons with festivals of light. "It sounds beautiful," Luke said when she finished describing the festival of 7 moons that happened once every 3 years on her world. "Do you miss it sometimes?" she said quietly. "But there is no work for plasma engineers there anymore. The council sends all the technical jobs to other planets now. My people can only find employment as maintenance workers on stations like this one." Luke was quiet for a long moment. "That seems like a waste of incredible talent." "It is the way things are," Zara 9 said. "The council decides what work each species is best suited for, and we follow their guidance." "What if there was another way?" Luke asked. "What if you could do the work you were trained for instead of just fixing other people's mistakes?" Zara 9 did not know how to answer that question because she had stopped thinking about doing real engineering work years ago. The possibility seemed as distant as the stars themselves. Over the next week, Luke came to find her every day when she finished her regular work assignments. Sometimes they worked on his ship together, and sometimes they just talked in the quiet spaces of the station where nobody else went. Zara-9 learned that Luke had studied engineering on Earth and worked on colony ships. Before joining the crew of the Wanderer's Dream, we are not explorers or traders, he explained. We help people who want to start new lives on frontier planets. We carry supplies and equipment to places where families are building communities from nothing. That sounds like important work, Zara-9 said. It is good work, Luke agreed. But it can be lonely sometimes. Most of the crew are just doing their jobs and counting the days until they can retire somewhere comfortable. I am the only one who really cares about helping the colonists succeed. Zara-9 understood lonely. She had been lonely for most of her life, even though she was surrounded by other beings every day. Being ignored was a special kind of loneliness. That made you feel like you might disappear entirely if you stayed still for too long. On the 7th day, Luke came to find her in the maintenance bay where she was cleaning plasma conduits for a Vex research vessel. He seemed nervous about something and kept running his hand through his hair while he talked. The Wanderer's Dream is leaving tomorrow, he said. We have a contract to deliver supplies to a new colony world called Haven's Rest. It is about 6 months' travel from here. Zara-9 felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had known this day would come, but she had not wanted to think about it. I hope you have a safe journey, she said. That is not what I came to talk to you about, Luke said. He sat down on a supply crate so they were at the same eye level and looked directly at her. I've been thinking about our conversations this week. About you and your people and the way things are on this station. He paused and seemed to be choosing his words carefully. The colony on Haven's Rest needs engineers. Real engineers who can design and build systems instead of just maintaining equipment that other people created. They need someone who understands plasma technology because they are planning to build their own power generation systems. Zara-9 stared at him. Are you offering me a job? I am offering you more than that, Luke said softly. I am offering you a partnership. A chance to be part of something important instead of invisible. She did not understand what he meant by partnership. Nobody had ever offered her any kind of partnership before. Luke seemed to realize she was confused because he reached out and gently took her small blue hands in his larger brown ones. Zara-9, he said, and his voice was so gentle it made her want to cry. I am asking if you will come with me to Haven's Rest, not as crew member or employee, but as my partner in building something new and good. I do not understand, she whispered. I am asking if you will be mine, he said, and I will be yours. We can work together and live together and build a life together on a world where nobody cares what species you come from or what number is painted on your uniform. Zara-9 felt like the station was spinning around her. Nobody had ever asked her to be theirs before. Nobody had ever wanted her as anything more than a tool that could reach inside machines. The idea that someone might want her thoughts and her dreams and her companionship seemed impossible. But I'm just a maintenance worker, she said. No, Luke said firmly. You are a plasma engineer who has been wasted on maintenance work because people are too stupid to see what you really are. You are intelligent and skilled, and you understand things that I could never figure out on my own. You are exactly what Haven's Rest needs, and you are exactly what I need. Tears started running down her blue cheeks because nobody had ever needed her before. Not really. They had needed her hands to reach inside machines and her knowledge to fix problems, but nobody had ever needed her. The other humans on your ship will not like having a Catherian as your partner, she said. Luke smiled. The other humans on my ship do not get to decide who I choose to spend my life with. That choice is mine to make and yours to accept or refuse. What about the station commander? She asked. What about the council regulations about service species? What about them? Luke said. You are not property that belongs to the station. You are a free being who can choose where you want to go and what you want to do with your life. If you want to come with me, then nobody has the right to stop you. Zara-9 looked into his dark eyes and saw something there that she had never seen before when anyone looked at her. She saw love. Real love that had nothing to do with what she could fix or what work she could do. Love that just wanted her to be happy and safe and valued. Yes, she whispered. I will be yours and you will be mine. News of Luke's proposal spread through Nexus Prime faster than plasma fire through damaged conduits. By the next morning, every trader and traveler on the station had heard that a human engineer wanted to take a Catherian maintenance worker as his partner. The reactions ranged from confusion to disgust to outright anger. Kesvak, the Drakmori trader, cornered Luke near the food courts and hissed his displeasure in the common language that all species used for business. Human Carter, you make error of judgment. Service beings are not for partnership. They are for work tasks only. Service beings are people, Luke replied calmly. People can choose their own lives. Negative incorrect, sang. Crystalline mind of logic, the Vex observer in musical tones that hurt the ears. Catherian species designated maintenance function by council wisdom for 300 cycles. Human species. Too new to understand proper order. I understand that the proper order is wrong, Luke said. The conversations grew more heated as the day went on. Some of the other humans who worked on different ships docked at the station came to talk to Luke about his decision. Most of them thought he was making a mistake that would hurt how other species viewed humanity. We are still new to the council, said Captain Kate Murphy from the cargo hauler Northern Star. We cannot afford to make enemies by breaking their social rules. Their social rules are built on treating intelligent beings like property, Luke answered. If following those rules is what it takes to be accepted, then maybe we should not be part of their council. But the real trouble started when Station Commander Vorthka heard what was happening. The massive Gorton warrior summoned Luke to his office in the command section of the station. The room was designed to intimidate visitors with its high ceiling and the huge weapons displayed on the walls from Vorthka's many battles. Human Carter, the commander rumbled in a voice like distant thunder, you will cease this inappropriate behavior immediately. Service species cannot be removed from their assigned functions without proper authorization. Zara 9 is not property that needs authorization to leave, Luke said. She is a free being who can make her own choices. Vorthka stood up from behind his desk and his shadow fell across Luke like a dark cloud. You do not understand council law, human. Catherians are bound to maintenance duties by treaty signed by their own government. To remove one without permission violates interspecies agreements. Then the treaties are wrong, Luke said without backing down. Treaties are not wrong or right, Vorthka growled. Treaties are law. You will abandon this foolish partnership plan or face detention for interference with council operations. Luke left the commander's office knowing that he had a choice to make. He could give up his plan to take Zara 9 to Haven's Rest and avoid trouble with the authorities. Or he could stand by what he believed was right and face whatever consequences came from that decision. He found Zara 9 in the maintenance bay, where she was trying to work on a Vex computer system while tears ran down her blue cheeks. She looked up when he entered, and he could see that she already knew what had happened. They will not let me leave with you, she said quietly. They cannot stop us unless we let them, Luke replied. But I need to ask you something important. Are you willing to fight for the right to choose your own life? I do not know how to fight, Zara 9 said. My people are not warriors like the Gorton or traders like the Drakmori. We just try to survive and do our work and not make trouble for anyone. Sometimes not making trouble is the same as accepting injustice, Luke told her. Sometimes the right thing to do is make trouble. That afternoon, Luke sent messages to every human ship in the sector. He told them what was happening on Nexus Prime and asked for their help. He did not ask them to fight or threaten anyone. He just asked them to come and be witnesses to what the council was willing to do to keep 2 people apart. The first ship arrived that evening. Then 3 more came the next morning. By the 3rd day, there were 15 human vessels surrounding Nexus Prime in a loose formation that blocked the main shipping lanes. They did not point weapons at anyone or make threats over the communication channels. They just sat there and refused to move. Captain Jake Morrison from the Wanderer's Dream stood with Luke in the observation deck, looking out at the growing fleet of human ships. This is going to cause problems for all of us, he said. The council will not forget that humans disrupted their trade routes. Good, Luke replied. Maybe if we cause enough problems, they will realize that treating people like property causes even bigger problems. But Luke and his supporters were not just blocking ships. They were also doing something that had never happened before in the long history of Nexus Prime. They were talking to the service species workers. Human crew members went to the maintenance levels and the cleaning areas and the food preparation stations. They introduced themselves and asked questions and listened to stories. For the first time in 300 cycles, the Velthory cleaners had someone ask them about their families back home. The Sisk food preparers found people who wanted to know their real names instead of just their work numbers. The Catherian maintenance workers discovered that someone cared about their dreams and hopes for the future. Word spread through the service levels like wildfire. Beings who had been invisible for generations suddenly found themselves at the center of attention. They shared stories of unfair treatment and impossible working conditions and dreams that had been abandoned because their species were not allowed to pursue certain types of careers. The humans recorded these stories and broadcast them on open communication channels that reached other stations throughout Council space. For the first time, the galaxy heard the voices of beings who had been silent for centuries. On other stations and colonies, the service species workers began to speak up too. They organized work slowdowns and demanded better treatment. Some of them simply walked away from their jobs and refused to come back until their rights were recognized. The economic impact was immediate and severe. Trade routes backed up as maintenance work went undone. Food services shut down when the preparers went on strike. Cleaning systems failed when their operators refused to show up for work. The Galactic Council found themselves facing a crisis they had never imagined. The foundation of their economy was cracking because the beings they had treated as living tools were demanding to be treated as people. Emergency sessions were called. Ambassadors argued through the night about how to handle the growing rebellion. Some wanted to use force to put the service species back to work. Others realized that the old system was broken beyond repair. In the middle of it all, Luke and Zara9 waited on Nexus Prime for someone to decide their fate. They had started something much bigger than they intended, but neither of them regretted the choice they had made. The crisis reached the heart of the Galactic Council when trade through 7 major sectors ground to a complete halt. Service species workers from dozens of different planets had joined the movement that started with one human asking one Catherian if she would be his. The council chambers echoed with angry voices as representatives from the major species demanded action. Human representative Amanda Foster stood at the speaking podium in the great circular hall where laws were made for 1,000 worlds. She was a small woman compared to most of the other ambassadors, but her voice carried clearly through the vast space when she began to speak. "Honored representatives," she said, "we are here today because 2 beings fell in love and wanted to build a life together. That should be a cause for celebration, not crisis. The human speaks of love but ignores law," roared Ambassador Gorth Prime of the Gorton delegation. "Service species have functions assigned by treaty. Chaos follows when functions are abandoned. The chaos comes from treating intelligent beings like machines," Amanda replied. "You cannot build a stable society on the backs of people who have no voice in their own government." The Drakmori representative Hiska rose from his seat with scales flashing in anger. "Service species have voice through designated speakers. System has worked for 3 centuries without problems. The system has worked for you," Amanda said. "It has not worked for the billions of beings whose only crime was being born into a species you decided was good for nothing but manual labor." She touched a control on the podium and holographic images filled the air above the assembled delegates. The images showed Catherian children learning plasma physics in crystal caves. They showed Velthory artists creating beautiful sculptures from recycled materials. They showed Sisk philosophers developing complex theories about the nature of consciousness. "These are not simple creatures who can only push buttons and carry boxes," Amanda continued. "These are complete civilizations with art and science and literature and dreams. You have wasted their potential for 300 years because it was convenient for you to have a permanent Servant class, pretty words do not change economic reality, sang Crystal Harmony of Thought from the Vex delegation. Service functions must be performed by someone. If not by service species, then by whom? By people who choose that work and are paid fairly for doing it, Amanda answered. By beings who can leave their jobs if they find better opportunities. By individuals who are valued for their contributions instead of trapped by the circumstances of their birth. The debate went on for hours as representatives argued about treaties and trade agreements and the cost of changing systems that had been in place for centuries. Some of the older species representatives insisted that the current order was natural and necessary. Others began to admit that maybe the time had come for reforms, but the real change came when a new voice spoke from the gallery, where observers were allowed to watch the proceedings. Nobody had expected any of the service species to be present, because they were not considered important enough to attend. Council sessions. Zara to 9 stood up in the observer section with Luke beside her and spoke in a clear voice that reached every corner of the great hall. My name is Zara 9, but that is not my real name. My real name is Zara Kathuram, which means singer of crystal songs in my people's language. I am a plasma engineer who has been reduced to fixing other people's mistakes because you decided that was all my species was good for. A murmur of surprise rippled through the assembly as other service species beings stood up throughout the gallery. They began to speak their real names and tell their real stories for the first time in a public forum. I am Velt Norum, which means keeper of growing things, and I have a degree in agricultural sciences, but I spend my days cleaning floors. I am Siskaraveleth, which means thinker of deep thoughts, and I wrote 17 books on philosophy before. I was assigned to food preparation duties. One by one they shared their names and their backgrounds and their dreams. The council representatives listened in growing amazement as they realized that the beings they had dismissed as simple laborers were actually doctors and engineers and artists and scientists. When the last voice had spoken, the great hall fell silent. Then Amanda Foster asked the question that would echo through history. How can we call ourselves civilized when we refuse to see the sapient beings among us, she said. How can we claim to represent justice and progress when we build our prosperity on the forced labor of people whose only crime was trusting us to treat them fairly? The vote that followed was not unanimous, but it was decisive. The Galactic Council passed new laws recognizing the full citizenship rights of all sapient beings, regardless of their species or their historical role in council society. Service contracts would be voluntary and limited in duration. Beings would be free to pursue education and careers based on their individual abilities rather than their species designation. The changes did not happen overnight, and they did not happen without problems. Some species withdrew from the council rather than accept the new laws. Others struggled to adapt their economies to a system based on free choice rather than forced labor. But slowly and steadily the galaxy began to change. Luke and Zara 9 were married on Haven's Rest 6 months later in a ceremony that was broadcast to 1 billion worlds. Beings from dozens of species attended either in person or through holographic links. The colony's first permanent structure was a small chapel built from local stone and decorated with crystals that Zara 9 had grown using techniques from her homeworld. As they exchanged vows under the light of Haven's Rest's twin son Zara 9 thought about how far she had traveled from the dark maintenance corridors of Nexus Prime. She was no longer invisible, and she was no longer alone. Do you take this human to be your partner in all things? Asked the officiant, who was a Velthari priest that had left his cleaning duties to pursue his true calling. I do, Zara 9 said, and her voice carried the weight of revolution. Do you take this Catherian to be your partner in all things? The priest asked Luke. I do, Luke replied. And I promise to keep asking the question that changed everything. After the ceremony, they walked together through the growing settlement that would become their home. Former service species beings worked alongside humans and other free beings to build houses and plant crops and design the infrastructure that would support a new kind of community. Zara 9 had established the colony's first plasma engineering firm and was training apprentices from multiple species in advanced energy systems. Luke worked with her to develop new technologies that combined human innovation with Catherian plasma expertise. In the evening, they sat on the porch of their small house and watched the sunset paint colors across the sky. That reminded Zara 9 of the plasma storms on her birth world. Luke reached over and took her small blue hand in his larger brown one. "Are you happy with the choice we made?" he asked. Zara to 9 thought about the question for a moment. She thought about all the beings throughout the galaxy who were now free to choose their own paths because one human had been willing to see her as more than just a maintenance worker. "You asked me if I would be yours, Luke," she said softly. "But what you really gave me was the chance to be mine? To be myself instead of just a number on a work uniform." Above them, the first stars of evening began to appear in the darkening sky. Ships from dozens of worlds arrived daily at Haven's Rest, carrying refugees and dreamers and anyone who wanted to live in a place where being seen and being valued was not reserved for certain kinds of beings. The humans had brought something unique to the galaxy after all. Not superior technology or physical strength or special powers, but something much more revolutionary. They had brought the radical idea that every conscious being deserved to be asked softly and with respect the question that changed everything. "Will you be mine?"